Thank you. The chair recognizes gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. It's a few things, and there's been a lot of questions, a lot of understanding of text and bias and a lot of things. And I think something was really interesting, and two things that I want to sort of base some of the questions I'm going to have on, because someone asked a little bit, one of my colleagues asked, is the special counsel not accountable, is unaccountable? And you said, no, they're accountable to you.
Correct.
Okay. I think, which presents my line of questioning in a little bit of a way, because I think there has to be, at least in your mind, a little bit of embarrassment of what's going on right now. Because I think you, in good conscience, chose Director Mueller, believing, as many of us did, just a very respectable record, one that we could all trust. And now we're starting to find out that this team has been put together with interest. One of the questions that was also asked about Mr. Strzok did you know of his bias? And you responded, no. Now, given the indication there, the flip side is that you would agree that there is a bias that looks at least to be presented in these text messages. Would you agree with that?
I agree that the text messages raise concern. As I said, I'm going to withhold my judgment until the investigation is completed.
Well, that brings up an interesting question, because I spent time last week with the FBI Director, Wray, and it was really interesting that especially some of his comments, that he felt like he didn't have to provide to this committee. I think hopefully after that, he realized that we do have direct jurisdiction and he will be getting us stuff. But he brought up this issue of Mr. Strzok and where he is now. So I want us to focus just these last few minutes on where this issue is. At the time, you give direct accountability to Director Mueller. When you discussed, was there a discussion between you and Director Mueller about moving Mr. Strzok off the committee, off the investigation?
I believe Director Mueller and I were together when we learned from the Inspector General about what he had found.
And by the way, when did you have that discussion and he was removed again?
It was approximately July 27th.
And it is just coming out that he was removed, correct? Publicly.
I think the fact that he was no longer in the case was known. The reasons were not known. The
reason was not known. And I think that's an interesting thing, because it does, and again, perception is reality in most parts, and whether that's true or false is perception is reality. And perception is that, oh, we found a problem, this investigation could be tainted, we don't really want this to come out, and now it's starting to come out. But I do have a question, just in a process. Because Mr. Wray last week said he was not demoted, he was just moved to HR. I made the comment at that point that said, it is funny to me that the second in command in the investigation division being put on a very high profile investigation, one of the highest in this town in a long time, and then simply being moved over to HR was not a demotion. In fact, why would you put somebody with challenges that you have now seen in the text, which we didn't have last week, why would you put him in HR? There seems to be a little bit of a problem there. So I do have a question. When he was removed from the investigation, did he possess a security clearance?
I believe he did. I don't have personal knowledge, but I'm fairly confident he did.
You don't know if he has a security clearance for working on what he was working on?
I'm certain he would have had a security clearance.
Okay, was it revoked, or is it revoked or suspended at this point?
Not to my knowledge.
Why would it not be?
Why would it not be revoked?
Why? Because I think what we're having here is there's a double standard. The new agent coming in, working, or the new U.S. attorney in office coming in and having what is now perceived as bias, working on a case in which that bias would at least be perceived by most average individuals as having an influence on the outcome of an investigation, especially him being involved in all of these other parts of this, changing letters, changing this. I think the interesting issue is he being treated differently than a younger agent or a line agent out in another field office?
I appreciate that question, Congressman. If I may explain, I can understand why to the average American it might seem unusual, but within the Department of Justice, we're subject to the government employment regulations, and there are very strict rules about what we may and may not do. So when we have an allegation of misconduct, it's investigated, and we don't take any disciplinary action unless and until a conclusion is made that it's warranted. So the decision to transfer the agent was made based upon what was known at the time. That's not a punishment. If there is an adverse finding, and again, I'm supervising the Inspector General, I need to withhold my judgment, but if there is an adverse finding, and our employees have due process rights, so they have a right to provide any explanation or defense. I don't know what it's going to be, but they have a right to do that. And at the conclusion, and Mr.
And I agree with that. Let me just jump in here because at the end, and I appreciate where you're headed there. I understand the investigation, but also let me say, this is a gentleman who, through these texts that we have seen, is an understanding that he wanted to protect America, that he didn't like the new president. He is still involved in the FBI. He still, at this point, undoubtedly still has a security clearance. He is. Does it not strike you that at least this person who had access to very high risk, sensitive security issues dealing in this Russia investigation, why would they have not been separated out under all rules and regulations, but at least taken around? Has he been polygraphed simply since he's in regards to this?
The Inspector General is responsible for handling that review, and when he concludes it, as I said, there'll be a public report. And with regard to the timing, I should clarify, I actually had anticipated and hoped the report would have been completed in November, but it's not completed yet, but I anticipate it'll be ready soon.
Is there a reason why it's not been completed?
Yes, because the Inspector General made a determination that he wasn't finished.
Well, I think that. All right, I think the impression here is, though, again, is that somebody's been treated special and that you're looking at it, and I think from your having the responsibility and accountability for the special counsel, it is on you at this point to make sure that that is corrected. And right now, there's a lot of mistrust out there. Thank you, and I yield back.